And there he is, the man with the plan, Mr. Jeff Berwick himself.
How are you, sir?
Great. How are you doing, Mr. Berwick?
I'm doing fine, thank you.
Hi, Jeff.
Good.
Hello.
Hi, this is Liberty Lisa.
Hi, Liberty Lisa.
Well, I'm excited. I'm excited to hear about you. I apologize. I've never actually heard of you before. I mean, I've heard your name in circles, but I'm kind of new to all this. I woke up about 4.5 years ago. Been fighting since I woke up, but I'm learning new things all the time. But I was pretty excited to hear about you, that you are taking a platform to fight inside the system. I've always been one of the people who has cheerleaded that effort because, to me, the alternative is to do nothing, and to me, that's feeding complacency. Just feeds the beast.
Yeah, that's the same conclusion I came to over a number of years, actually. It was a few years ago. If you would have asked me, would you ever get involved in the political system, I would have said no. I just considered it to be an evil system, and I don't want anything to do with it. But at the same time, during this entire time, I really want to see more freedom in the world, or definitely in the areas where I'm around. And we've been trying so many different things, and it just seems like it doesn't work. So when a lot of people who are really against anything to do with government, they don't vote, that doesn't stop the government from being there. It actually just gets worse because there's no one even trying to slow them down. And so I talked to Walter Block, who's Mr. Libertarian, a few months ago on my podcast, Anarchast. And he pretty much convinced me that we should run for government and we should try to do everything. Not everyone should do it, obviously, but for people who want to, it's not a bad thing to do. It's not negative to do it. It's actually positive to try to, in any way possible, slow this beast down of government. And right after that, I spoke with Darryl Perry, who's running for president, I believe under the Libertarian Party or under Independent in the U.S., and he talked for about an hour talking about all the reasons why we should do things like this and why we shouldn't not do things like this. And I was pretty convinced at that point. And so at that point, I'm from Canada, so I contacted the Libertarian Party of Canada, who is run by a person named Tim Moen. And I call him the Ron Paul of Canada. He really is. And he's also an anarcho-capitalist, as am I. And actually, the past leader of the Libertarian Party of Canada is an anarcho-capitalist. And the founder in the 60s of the Libertarian Party of Canada is an anarcho-capitalist, Sig Pede. And so, in a way, this is almost like the anarcho-capitalist Party of Canada. But really, the word libertarian has grown so much over the last few years. It's actually becoming acceptable in many places now. It's actually being understood to some extent by some people now. So the real goal of the Libertarian Party of Canada is to reduce government as much as possible in almost every facet. And I support that completely. I support reduction in government, and so I just decided after talking to everybody that, hey, I'm fairly well known. I'm from Canada. I've actually got a fairly big name in the area where I'm running in Vancouver because I started up one of the biggest internet companies in Canada in the 90s in Vancouver. We had over 240 employees there in the 90s. Called stockhouse.com. It's still the top financial website today. And so I'm fairly well known. I've got a big audience around the world and in Canada. So I thought, well, let's just do this and get on there and get out there and debate with politicians and stuff like that. Just get on the media talking about freedom concepts, just like Ron Paul did. The main goal essentially is education, to wake people up that there is another option other than heinous statist collectivism and having the government control things. And most people haven't even heard that because, of course, they're controlled by their mainstream media channels. And they go to their 12 years of public indoctrination camps, the government schools, where they don't tell them any of these things. They just tell them, well, there's this left and there's this right, and you have to just choose between the two, and they're always going to screw you, but there's no other way. And so I think, Ron Paul really was probably the biggest motivating factor for me in doing this, because I saw what he did in the U.S. He, in a matter of years, created millions of new libertarians who are incredibly passionate and know what they're talking about. And so I figured, let's try to do the same thing up in the Great White North where I'm from.
and I'm gonna give you kudos because I am a doubter that you can change the beast from within, Jeff. I'm going to be quite honest and upfront with you, and but I'm giving you kudos. At least you're trying. I just please. I mean, I know you wouldn't dare sell out to the beast. Please tell me no.
Absolutely not. And of course, every politician is going to lie, but I've lived my entire life under one principle, which is non-aggression principle, and I've been a devout, hardcore free market person, which is an anarchist or an anarcho-capitalist, or you could call it voluntarist, which is a true libertarian. It's the most extreme form of libertarianism, where you really, really believe in liberty. You don't just believe some liberty like some libertarians. So for me, if I were, and I agree with you, I don't know if we can really change much from within the system. But like I said, I think the big part is just waking people up that there is other options, and that that could really help change things. If I did get in, if I ever did anything that actually initiated violence against anyone, which is what government does through taxation and all their laws, then I would immediately be castigated by everybody who ever thought that I was anything decent, and I'd be pretty much ruined instantaneously, hopefully, and I hope that would happen if I did that. I have no intention of doing anything except for creating more freedom. And so when people ask me if I do get elected, what am I going to do? And essentially, I will not vote for any law that has a victim. So that would mean any sort of taxes, because taxes have a victim. It would mean any sort of regulation where you're forcing people with guns, which is what government does, to force them to do things that you arbitrarily want when they weren't hurting anyone else. So essentially, I'd say no to everything that anyone would want to pass in the government. And on the off chance that they wanted to actually pass something that actually reduced the amount of violence or reduce the amount of victims, which would be things like decrease the taxes and get the government out of all sorts of different areas where they're using violence against people, which are called laws, to have victims. So I would be just in the same way as Ron Paul, who was very steadfast that I don't think he ever voted for anything that increased taxes or regulation. And I believe, I don't know his whole record, but I believe that he was always trying to reduce things. But of course, that's very hard in the incredibly corrupt U.S. political system.
Right. Well, the Canadian system is not too far behind. For the listeners, can you explain what actually being a riding of Vancouver Centre entails, what that actually is?
Yeah, well, that's a good question. I don't really even know. I've never thought about running for government. I just decided today to announce it after looking into it last week. I don't even know who I'm running against, but I'm sure they're statist and immoral and unsound philosophically people because they believe in government controlling things. So I'll find out who they are. Apparently, I have a campaign manager already through the Libertarian Party who will tell me who I'm running against and try to get me into debates with them. I'm totally all new to this. I had never thought about doing this before. So this is a learning experience for me. But luckily, the Libertarian Party of Canada has a lot of real go-getters at it. I've met a number of them over the last week, and they really are passionate about wanting to get the Libertarian Party out there more, and so they're really helping out with a lot of those things.
Well, I'm passionate about anything to reduce or eliminate government anywhere, believe me. I mean, I really don't like these labels, but I mean, if you had the label where I'm coming from, I would actually go by an individualist, anarchist. I'm all about the individual and individual rights and screw the collective, basically.
Yeah, I'm the same way. That's collectivism is statism, essentially, and anarchism essentially is individualism, where you want to be your own ruler. You don't want someone else to rule you because there's a bunch of people who all decided somehow in this freedom thing, democracy, that if 51% of the people decide they want to put you in a cage, they're going to put you in a cage. It's essentially just mob rule, and it's really something that they're always trying to push, is to take away the rights of the individual and put more weight weight on there's a collective, there's the social contract, and that's crazy. That's essentially communism. That's fascism. That's all the things that most Americans, if you ask them, do you like fascism or communism, they'd go, no way, I'm an American. Well, that's exactly what the U.S. federal government is. So they've just been twisted and turned with words. They don't even really know what's going on at this point. And that's why I think it's so important to get out there and educate people.
Yeah, agreed. A lot of Democrats I've noticed are you mentioned communism, and they're now defending it. They're not, you know, they started out with just defending the word socialism, which is basically, you know, soft-core communism. But, you know, now they're actually defending communism. This country has just been turned upside down. And the interesting thing that I was raised kind of in a Republican, you know, neocon type environment. And so I saw all the hypocrisy on the left. So when I woke up, I started fighting for some of the same causes they were fighting for: the fluoride in the water, the GMOs, you know, the fracking, all these things I became concerned about. And I was so proud of them for actually being the ones out there in the streets and fighting for the people. And so in that part of it, I respect them. But then, on the other hand, you know, they want more taxes, more government, more safety net, more, and they're okay with losing freedom and adding more laws and more taxes and all these other things. I'm completely not. I want less laws, less taxes, you know, less government on every level. Like, I'm looking at a bare minimum, you know, like the 10 Commandments. You know, you don't kill, you don't steal, you know, you don't take from your neighbor, you don't do things like that. And those are where the laws should be. And I see a system more of just a judicial system in which, you know, society is accountable to those laws, in which they'd be pulled into a judicial system. But that's it. Outside of that, as long as you're not harming someone, you're free.
Yeah, that's essentially called natural law, and really you can boil it down to just don't steal, because when you kill someone, you actually are stealing. You're stealing their life. So there really doesn't need to be this big giant book of things that you can't do. And then, of course, in the U.S., it's literally encyclopedias and encyclopedias of laws that no one even knows what they are. There's so many of them. Really, you can boil it down to two words: don't steal. And you don't need necessarily a government-run judicial system to do that. There's no reason why you couldn't have a free market in things like judicial system, arbitration systems. People who have a problem with each other can agree to go to whichever, and it would be a free market. So they'd be competing for the best price and the best services, as opposed to the government, which of course is centrally planned and has a monopoly. So it never offers a good price or a good service, and it always is terrible. So yeah, you really, you don't need government for anything. Government is an unnecessary evil, but the problem is that most people don't realize that yet. And so that's why I say again that education is so important, because once people start to realize what we're talking about, they might get scared at first because they'll be so shocked that they didn't know about it, and they'll wonder, you know, how brainwashed was I and what happened. But then after that, they'll be quite excited thinking about the possibilities of how we could create a much better system for human beings around the world that would be much more peaceful and much more prosperous by getting rid of government entirely. Now, with me running for the Libertarian Party of Canada in Canada, we're not running on the platform of getting rid of the government. I'm following their platform, which is all about reduction of government. But as I said before, I mostly am just doing this to get these ideas out there and to educate people.
I see. Well, the problem is you cannot really, I mean, you and I both steadfastly agree you need a true free market, but you can't have a free market when you have government involved, because government is basically a monopoly. They monopolize.
Yeah, government is it's a monopoly. There's really no difference between mafia and government except for size. So they're just the biggest group of people with guns in the geographic region who steal from people, which is called taxes, and who kidnap and kill people, which is called laws and jails and being arrested and things like that for things that had no victim. And we're seeing in the U.S. Just how that turns out. We're seeing that in Baltimore. When you have a monopoly over policing, you're going to have terrible service, and it's just going to get out of control because they have no incentive to improve. And I wrote an article just recently about the answer to all the police brutality is privatize the police. This is totally possible. It's already been done in many places. In Detroit, because the police system has or because the government has gone bankrupt, they can't really afford to have much of a police anymore. So there's a bunch of private security firms that have popped up, and there's one called Threat Management Center, and they've been actually operating for 20 years, and they have no history of any of their clients ever getting harmed during any sort of event. And their number one goal is to reduce the amount of violence in a situation, which is totally opposite to what the government police are like nowadays, where they just show up and start beating people and pepper spraying and escalating the violence. And so, there's so many answers to things out there, but people haven't gotten access to this information. So that's why it's so important to at least get people access to this information. They can make their own decisions after that. But most people just have never even heard of these ideas. They've been in the dark that it is possible to not have someone rule you violently and steal most of your money. It says, that never occurred to anybody, but it is possible.
Well, it's true, and Lisa and I we just did a show on this civil forfeiture, which is running rampant here in the United States, where the police confiscate property and money, and your property or money is deemed illegitimate till you prove it's legitimate.
Yeah, they're getting worse and worse.
Guys, but the problem with privatization, which sounds good in conceptually, the problem with that is they're not under constitutional restraint. And for example, here if you want to talk about working inside the system, the privatization in the current system is not the answer because they're not operating inside the constitutional restraints. We're having, for example, the motor vehicle department out here in Nevada has been privatized, and they've gone haywire. They're calling
that's totally different, though. That's totally different. When they privatize them, but they still have a monopoly and they're still in a government system, that is just almost as bad as just keeping it public. But what I'm talking about is true privatization, just getting the government out of that industry completely. So, for example, in healthcare, for example, they now have Obamacare in the U.S. I would suggest just getting the government completely out of it and allowing services to compete. Now, of course, in the U.S., it gets very confusing because there's so much fascism and so much corporatism, lobbyists who work with the politicians to get all sorts of rules and regulations to make it hard for people to compete with them. But if there actually was a free market without any sort of government violence involved, then people would have to compete for things. So, for example, that DMV, as an example, if the government wasn't involved in anything to do with licensing of vehicles, there wouldn't be a DMV because there's no market need for people wanting to pay money to somebody to get a sticker. But because they still have to get that sticker, they just say, oh, we'll privatize it or whatever, but it's not privatized because it's not a service that anyone wants. If it was a service that people wanted, and it truly was privatized, then you'd see 5 or 6 different DMVs pop up, and someone would say, hey, I'll sell you a sticker for $10 instead of $100, and people go, oh, great. But that's where it gets confusing to some people, is nothing is really very privatized in the world today because of all the government involvement in various ways.
So I would just ask you, Jeff, in the position that you're entering, to make a distinction when you start talking about privatization, because I personally believe that the powers that be are utilizing the ignorance of the people, taking little sound bites of patriots out there who are mentioning privatization and twisting it to their benefit.
Oh, absolutely. That's their game, and I'm sure they'll do that to me a million times. There's not really much I can do about it because I can't say something, a 10-word sentence in less than 1 second or less to make sure that they can't clip it or anything. But that's why, again, it's so important to educate because some people will listen. Some people will be listening to your show, and they may not understand all the ideas. They may not even like some of the things I'm saying because it sounds so strange to them, but they have never probably looked into it, whereas I've looked into this for about 15 years and looked at all sorts of privatizations around the world, including the roads in some countries. In Chile, I was down there last year. All their highways are all private, completely private. And they're the nicest roads I've ever been on in my life. And you just pay to be on them, and that's it. And great services on them. They've always got ambulances every like 10 kilometers and things like that. So yeah, these topics aren't super easy for someone to understand, and so it is difficult to say them in just a few 5-second snippet. And that's why I think we just have to get out there more and start saying these things. And then as people start to hear them more and more, they might look into them themselves and then really realize what we're talking about.
Well, I think Lisa, what you have a problem wrapping your mind around, and what Jeff is putting forward is a true free market. Because that even though the DMV is privatized, it's still in government's pocket, and they have no competition. So
right.
So it's
the key's
private
the competition.
name only.
I understand the theory. I'm just saying that it's becoming a word that's being dropped in realms, of the liberty movement more and more, privatization. But people aren't taking the time to explain that in any sort of fashion, and I think it's being used as a weapon against us because privatization in the current government regime, because there's no other word to describe it, is actually against us, again, because if in the current system there is at least constitutional restraint on the government, whereas you get a privatization involved and that goes away. And so all I'm saying is that since we've got somebody who wants to work inside of the system, and like myself, I'm the same way, I just think that I would hope that he and others would start discussing the full realm of that topic when it comes up.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a lot of learning I'm going to have to do about how to talk to people that don't normally hear what I'm talking about. One of the things about me is that I run the Dollar Vigilante website, which talks about the coming dollar collapse, and it's a very free market, anarcho-capitalist, Austrian economics-based website. And then I have Anarchast, which interviews anarcho-capitalists from around the world. It's the largest anarchist interview show in the world. We've interviewed over 200 anarcho-capitalists. So when people, almost everybody who knows about me finds me. It's not like I'm in their face. I'm not on their TV every night. I'm not on the radio. I'm on the internet, and so it's a very much a pull sort of a mechanism rather than a push mechanism, which is what more mainstream media is. And so I haven't had to try to figure out how exactly to talk to an audience that isn't used to any of these concepts I'm talking about. So that's something I'm definitely going to have to learn to get better at, and I take your advice on that, I have to think about exactly how to pose these things so as not to scare people too much because make them think I'm crazy because they've just never heard these concepts before, or they get the words mixed up because they've been so skewed, a lot of these words. So yeah, it's definitely a battle for words and for ideas out there, and the government has had quite a monopoly over that for a long period of time until the internet, and we're starting to see now, thanks to the internet, that other voices can get out finally, and it's causing quite a revolution.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm super excited about what you're doing, and I personally have been fighting U.S. Bank and basically unconstitutional laws in Colorado that strip the homeowners of their due process, basically non-judicial foreclosures with absolutely zero due process. And it's the greatest land grab, property grab, people grab. It's amazing what's happening, just the thievery and the lack of constitutional rights in across the United States, but specifically in Colorado, and I've been fighting inside the court system. So it's been interesting. I've made the papers and have made some headway for others, and we'll see. Hopefully there's a crack in the dam, and we'll start seeing some major changes in the next year or two.
Yeah, I'm incredibly optimistic. I think there's going to be a total sea change towards liberty in the next couple of years. I can totally see it coming. I've been around this sort of area for over 10 years now. And I remember 10 years ago, if you would have said to me, do you think libertarianism's really taking off? I'd be like, no, not really at all. And it's just taken off so much now, and it's just almost going exponential. And we'll see what happens over the next couple of years, because people are getting really, I think most people, your average person, is waking up and going, something's wrong with this system. No matter what we do, it never works. It never works for me anyway, and it doesn't work for society in general. And so they keep going, oh, I'll tick the right box, I'll tick the left box. I'm from Canada, as I mentioned. They just had a provincial election up in Alberta. Alberta is the Texas of Canada. It's known as being very conservative. It's got a lot of oil. It's got a lot of cowboys and things like that. And they've been conservative. That's where I was born. And ever since I was born, they've always been conservative. They just elected a full communist government. And most of the people, and this is just last week, and most of the people are like 20 years old. They're in university, and they're all communists. So the people elected them because they're just giving up. They're like, well, these other parties are horrible. We've never tried the communists. So they're trying that now. And that's, of course, going to turn out just unbelievably horrible. And so I think the ones left standing at the end of that, once everything just gets destroyed, will be the libertarians. And people go, who are these libertarians? We've never looked at those guys, and we're, of course, the ones that actually have the real answers for how to improve everyone's lives in many ways, and so I think there's going to be a huge uptake. I think Ron Paul really started something huge. It was already there, but he coalesced it. He managed to just sort of make it all happen all at once, and I'm seeing it all over the world. We're seeing in Brazil a big capitalism uprising, a true capitalism, not crony capitalism, but like true free markets. People want free markets. There's 100,000 likes on the Brazil Mises webpage, which is the Mises Institute of Brazil. Ludwig von Mises is the sort of the founder of Austrian economics, which is essentially free market economics. And so there's 100,000 people in Brazil who like that Facebook page. So people are waking up. There's a lot going on. It's not going to be easy. We're still going to have to go through probably a total collapse of most of these governments that are all bankrupt and insolvent. But the more people who understand that there is a better way during this process and during the collapse, we can more quickly move to a much better and more peaceful and prosperous world, hopefully with much less government, and even best case scenario with no government at all.
Yeah.
Those are the magic words, no government at all. And yes, I despise this illusion of authority and this government. And you know, Jeff, I'm going to ask you, because you're an anarchist and you're running for government. I ask all the statists, and I can never get a working definition. Can you define what government is?
Well, the one thing I would say is there really is no government. It's an idea. You can't point to any place and say, that's it, that's the government, and you just point at the White House. Well, that's just a building. What is the government? Government is a superstition. It's an idea that's been just ingrained into people for a long period of time. And if you look at the word government, if you look at the roots of the words, govern is control, ment is mind. So it's mind control of the people to make them believe in this idea of authority that doesn't really exist. No one, if you don't have the right to steal from someone else, why does the government have that right? How did they get that right? And who is the government? As I pointed out, it just seems to be this mishmash of bureaucrats and people with guns coming in and out and stealing money from people. So I once said that government is essentially, how did I put it? I had a good quote on it. I said, government is essentially a bunch of people in costumes listening to other people in costumes committing massive crimes.
Basically, government is mafioso. It really is, on a grander scale with more guns and more weapons.
Yeah, that we initiate and promote with our own money, and we get behind it. We're like, yes, well, this is good. This war is good because we have to justify it this way, and and this violence is good because it's needed. These people are bad. They're breaking the law. I just have a post today on my page. I had to put it up there. It's just kind of like, wow, I can't believe this. So Austin was posting about, he thinks, people who are so wrapped into the flag, which the flag is just a symbol, for the United States of America. Nothing against the United States of America, but yeah, it is just a symbol, and every nation has one. One is not superior to another as far as, we're all children of God on this earth. Well, anyway, he was posting some things about, basically flaggots. He's what he called them. People who are, who are just, chasing after the flag and defend it vehemently. So some guy actually posted today, let's see, for all you criminals posting you defiling the flag of the United States, I hope the cops find you because it isn't freedom of speech, it's a crime. Then he posted 5-51-207, contempt for or desecration of the United States flag. And then somebody else posted underneath it, I couldn't even believe it, hope they get busted big time. And I was just like, wow, nationalism is alive and well. And I had to get broken of all of that because it's not that I hate America or freedom or anything that it stands for. I'm proud of the Constitution and what it did for America at first, and the way that we were set up initially, and the prosperity that we had initially, and the freedom that we had initially. The concept was, a fairly strong one, but nonetheless, when you look at yourself as superior to everyone else, and you don't, if I was born in a different country, I'd be proud to be a part of that country and that heritage and their background and their history and whatever colors their flag is.
That's the problem. Nationalism and country and government worship. Be yourself. Be an individual. And I'm going to let Jeff have the last word. I know he's got 2 other interviews he's going to roll today. Well, 3 more.
Yeah, it's been quite a busy day. Talking about nationalism, though, Doug Stanhope had a great quote on nationalism. I'm just going to see if I can pull it up because it was so well said. And talking about burning the flag, here it is. So Doug Stanhope, a great libertarian comedian. Nationalism does nothing but teach you to hate people you never met and to take pride in accomplishments you had no part in. And I think that's an excellent definition of nationalism. And it's these people who get so upset about burning the American flag, these are the same people who get really upset when Islamic people try to hurt or kill people who draw Muhammad. So they have major cognitive dissonances. Apparently, if someone tries to draw Muhammad and someone doesn't like that, they think those guys are really bad. But if someone tries to burn a flag, they think that person burning the flag should be shot or killed or put in a cage or something. It's crazy. It actually shows it's a form of a cult. The fact that people can have visceral physical reactions to someone burning a piece of cloth shows they are deeply, deeply brainwashed, and that makes them very dangerous, and they are. For example, if someone there's actually a flag that people associate with anarcho-capitalism. It's half black and half yellow. If someone was standing on my street and he was burning a black and yellow flag, I'd be like, "Why are you doing that?" And he'd be like, "I don't like anarcho-capitalism." I'd be like, "Well, that's just a cloth that you're burning. How does that have anything to do with?" I wouldn't be upset. I'd be like, "Why are you destroying your own private property?" I'll go ahead if you want to. But it just shows how brainwashed, and unfortunately, in the U.S. is some of the most brainwashed people I've ever met in the world. There's not many worse, really. Not everybody, of course. You guys have awoken, but so many haven't. And it's just crazyville when I go there. I actually don't even go there anymore. I find it so crazy. I'm always doing something where I end up getting kidnapped kidnapped, which is arrested for just things that I would just normally do here in Mexico where I live, like walk outside of a bar with a drink in my hand. I had 3 squad cars surround me in Phoenix, and yeah, so it's crazy being around that sort of environment. And of course, there's better places and worse places, but yeah, a lot of people are really brainwashed, and they have no idea what's actually going on. They actually think they're supporting freedom, which is hilarious because they somehow associate the government of the U.S. with freedom when the U.S. federal government has been one of the most tyrannical, oppressive, non-freedom terrorist organizations in the world for the last 100 years. And they think that's free. Like, everything's flipped upside down. These guys have been run through a ringer. They've been indoctrinated, brainwashed. They get their mainstream media television programming at night, and it's called programming for a reason. And they're essentially living in the Truman Show, but it's a really not a nice Truman town that they live in. They have no idea. I'm not trying to denigrate them at all. It's really sad that this has happened to them. And I don't know what's going to happen to them, because everything that they believe, that think is real, they think they live in the land of the free and the home of the brave. When the dollar collapses, they're going to find out they live in the land of the unfree and home of the slave, and the FEMA camps will roll out, and they're going to be in shock. And that's why we need to educate people however we can. And there's a lot of people who are really brainwashed, just like in a cult. You sometimes meet people who somehow got brainwashed by a cult, but then they got out of it. It is possible to get people out of it, but we have to just be hitting them from every angle with information to try to wake them up. And that's why I decided to get involved with the political system, because it appears that a lot of these people who really believe in government, they really like the political system. So when you get into their system, they actually pay attention to you and listen to you, whereas they normally wouldn't. So that's essentially my goal.
Yeah, that actually makes great sense to me, and I applaud you for what you're doing, and totally agree with you about the brainwashing here. Of course, we're being poisoned with GMOs and fluoride more than any other country, and they've got us drugged up and in poor health and dying early of cancer. It's a great big science experiment over here, so it must be kind of fascinating for other countries to watch.
Yeah, a lot of people who don't live in the U.S. Like, I've lived all over the world. I've been to about 100 different countries. Your average person doesn't dislike Americans in general, but no one likes the U.S. federal government anywhere in the world. They can't believe that people put up with it wherever they are, especially in the U.S. So I think about half the people in the world, they watch Hollywood movies and they think the U.S. is like what they see in the movies, which of course it isn't. And then the other half kind of look at it like, oh my God, what is going on over there? This total craziness, what they say, like all the propaganda that they're fed on TV and how they're so oppressed, the poor Americans, Americans have no idea. Most Americans, and not all, again, I'm generalizing, but most don't even have a passport. They've never left the country, so they have no basis by which to compare which systems may or may not be better. And I think the U.S. is one of the worst places in the world right now. I can only think of a few countries that I would probably not choose over the U.S. if I was forced to live in them, and that would be North Korea. And I think that's about it. I think I could get by in Cuba just fine, even though it's got quite a bit of oppressive government, but it's still nothing as bad as the U.S. So, it's just, and all these people who have never left the U.S. keep saying it's the best country in the world. And it's sort of like a guy who only eats apple pie and nothing else. And he goes, the best food in the world is apple pie. And it's like, well, have you ever tried any other food? And he's like, no, I'm sure it's apple pie. It's like, well, okay. How do you even talk to somebody like that?
Yeah, it's definitely frustrating. Well, once you're awake, there's a battle between being compassionate and just being frustrated. And just like, okay, don't judge these people. You used to be there yourself,
Yeah, compassion is definitely the way. Definitely getting angry with them doesn't help anything ever. And it also doesn't help yourself. So, for example, if you're meeting somebody and they're completely brainwashed statist idiots, and just try to end the conversation as soon as possible and just move on, because you're just wasting your time. They're not going to listen to you for the most part. If you sense they're listening to you, then keep talking. But if not, just sort of say, "Well, I have to run. Nice meeting you. Go enjoy your Flag Day whatever event, and enjoy your land of the free party or whatever it is." And but I found that don't even bother getting angry or even get what was the word you used? You get started with a C. There was a word you used that you feel.
Oh, compassionate?
No, the other one. You were saying that you felt frustrated. I guess I think that was the word.
Frustrated, yeah.
Yeah, just don't let it get to you, because if that gets to you, that actually drains your energy as well, and it brings you down. And you need to be operating at a very high sort of energy level, a very positive energy level, in order to create positive change in the world. So don't even let it frustrate you. Just learn to sort of laugh at it as much as you can, not to their face or anything, but just like how we were today, laughing at how they are. It's like, oh my God, it's crazy and it's sad, but also kind of funny to watch them do all these crazy things. It's like watching like the Planet of the Apes or something, and they're all just like hooting and hollering around a flag and whatever. It's like, whoa, that's funny. But yeah, definitely the way to it is compassion, is to understand why they are that way and to try to help them. And it's hard, it's not easy, but that's always the way. And using, for example, if you get into an argument with somebody who's got a very closed mind, like a statist, and you say, I don't think government is even necessary, they're not even going to hear that. And then if you shout at them like, you're an idiot, that they're not going to listen to a word you say. That the conversation's over there. The debate's over. Once you start to get angry at somebody or yell at somebody, they're not going to listen to what you say. So you always have to be calm. If you don't sense that they're picking up on what you're talking about, just move along and try to, maybe you'll run into somebody else who's a bit more open-minded and see what happens. But definitely the way is through compassion and through just trying to show them the way. And we're not going to be able to do it for everybody. I've learned that over a long period of time. There's a lot of people who just will not wake up, and they don't want to wake up. They're actually scared to wake up. Even if they sense that they're not awake, that they're not conscious of what's really going on, they have this incredible desire to cling on to what they have because they fear what they don't know. So there's going to be a lot of people who will be left behind, so to speak, in this revolution of liberty, and we'll just see how that all plays out.
It'll be interesting.
I've found the best way to try and deal with these statists is calm, cool, collective, and use the Socratic method. And just ask them questions and believe me, I was for a long time. I was a Republican neocon. Then I went to the staunch constitutionalist. It took a long journey for me to see what's really right and what's really true. And I'm with you as the individual. You got to take care of yourself first to be in a position to help anyone else.
Yeah, absolutely. That's another good point is if you don't have yourself fixed, so if you have, everyone's got issues and everyone's got problems and none of us are perfect, but some of us are really not perfect. And if you have major issues, for example, if you can't socially talk very well, or you have certain fears that hold you back from things, you need to fix those things first before you can help fix others. Because otherwise you're not going to get very far, because you really need to fix yourself first, get yourself morally and philosophically sound, and any issues you have, any major issues, try to fix those issues, and then from there you can go and try to help others. Yeah, so there's a whole thing to it. I have to run. I'm sorry, guys, but I have a number of interviews to do.
Jeff, do me a favor and add me. I sent you a friend request today.
Okay, I think I'm at my max, but I'll try to delete somebody I don't like as much as you and add you.
And thanks again, Jeff Berwick, and good luck. Good luck in your endeavors, and thanks so much for joining us here on Guerrilla Radio.
Thank you, guys. Nice talking to you.